Greetings, Red Riot. Today I have the privilege of reflecting on this past week's preach from Aaron. If you have not watched it yet, please do so. Before I start, I would like to mention that there is a fun evening happening this week at church. If you would like to come, you can ask one of the youth leaders to share a link with you to sign up. Otherwise, you can watch it on Zoom and the link will be shared this week. Last week, Aaron spoke on oaths, retaliation, and loving your enemies. Now, in every statement that Jesus makes about these topics, he is not implying what we may think at face value. We need to read the words of Jesus carefully to see what he is saying. So with making oaths, Jesus is not abolishing them. Rather, he is saying that our character should be of the sort that what we say can be trusted. If we need to make oaths to be trusted, then we need to take a closer look at ourselves and change. The next thing Jesus mentions is an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Now that statement is scriptural. You can go and read it for yourself in Deuteronomy 19 verses 21. Read the context as well to get the full picture, because this law was intended only to be enforced by authorities as a way of carrying out justice for the people affected by injustice. God never allowed any individual to take matters into their own hands. Now, when Jesus mentions someone slapping us, the kind of slap mentioned here would represent any form of insult or injury faced in the hand of someone. The call to turn the other cheek is not a call to be a doormat. We turn the other cheek so that the other person who caused us harm can kiss us. In other words, our hearts should be for reconciliation and restoration. In Jesus, we who are victims of injustice have the privilege to become agents of reconciliation and restoration like Jesus, because he himself suffered a great injustice in our hands in order that he would reconcile us to God and restore what is broken. Jesus also stresses to us to have a generous heart. He, however, is not saying that we need to be foolish in our giving. Foolish giving is harmful. See Matthew 7 verse 6, although this is just one example of many scriptural references. So be generous, but be intentional and thoughtful about it. Now next, Jesus tells us to love our enemies. When he mentions enemies, he is specifically mentioning wicked people who walk in disobedience to God. If our enemies are not wicked people, we need to examine ourselves closely. Now, although God in the Old Testament did not say you must hate your enemies, many God-fearing men mentioned that they hated those who acted in rebellion against God, which makes sense. See Psalm 139 verse 21 for that. So when Jesus tells us to love them, he is not contradicting his Father. He's just stating what he has seen his Father do for centuries, and that is by providing for both the wicked and the righteous. Both of these people enjoy God's blessings on their lives. So then what do we make of the prayers in the Old Testament, where righteous men pray for God to bring vengeance and to not let wicked men prosper? Are these men being vindictive for praying those prayers? Does Jesus think these men were vindictive? Not at all. These men, like Jesus, were compassionate and merciful. David refused to cause harm to Saul, even though Saul was out to kill him, for example. The purpose of their prayers was in concern for the glory of God, the flourishing of God's creation, and the advancement of his grand purpose. When men acted wickedly, they threatened these things. The hope of the righteous was that these men would recognize God for who he is, so that they would change. In the same way, the point of Jesus calling us to love our enemies is so that people will recognize God for who he is. Because when people recognize God for who he is, they will change. So in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we can see that God is looking out for the good of humanity and his creation, and he calls us to reflect him by doing the same. When we love our enemies, seek reconciliation, restoration, and are trustworthy, we find ourselves reflecting God's very nature. Our God is full of grace and truth, the character essential for human flourishing. I am Peter, and you're watching Red Riot's Midweek Reflections. Bless you guys.